Jawaharlal Nehru is probably the most maligned politician in the history of the country. He was the first Prime Minister of India back in 1947, and somehow 60 years after his death, he is still politically relevant. So, today, let's take a look at some of the viral claims that are spread about Jawaharlal Nehru and let's debunk some lies. Lie number one: Nehru wanted the partition of India. So, the social media narrative about Nehru is that he was power hungry, he rushed the partition to become the Prime Minister of India, and that he willingly divided India into two parts. But let's take a look at the historical reality. For most of 1930s and early 1940s, Congress leadership, including Nehru, strongly opposed the partition. The demand of partition was mainly kept by Muhammad Ali Jinnah and the rest of the Muslim League. By 1946, though, communal violence was spiraling out of control. There were incidents like the Direct Action Day. The British wanted a quick exit out of India, and many leaders reluctantly accepted partition as the last viable option. It was the only way to stop the spread of communal violence that had captured the entire country. One thing that must also be considered is that it wasn't only Jawaharlal Nehru that accepted partition as the last viable option. It was also Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel and the rest of the Congress leadership at the time. In fact, even the Indian right wing wanted the partition, although they wanted it for very different reasons. But saying that Jawaharlal Nehru was the reason India partitioned, it's an absolute lie. The historical reality always will be that partition was a collective tragic compromise, not Nehru's personal project. Lie number two: Nehru was a womanizer. So this claim has been debunked to the very end. There are viral WhatsApp forwards which have edited photos with Edwina Mountbatten and sometimes with Nehru's own sister. They make claims that Nehru led an immoral life, but this is not true at all. There is no historical basis in this. Watch this image in order to understand how low these right wingers will fall in order to discredit a person. There is a sub lie between this main lie that Nehru and Edwina Mountbatten had an affair. This is absolutely not true. The reality is that Nehru and Edwina did share a close personal bond. They were friends, and unfortunately, in this country, being friends in a platonic consensual manner is the worst thing possible. There is no credible historical proof of any scandalous behavior. There is no evidence for misuse of office, and there was no major political scandal about them. In fact, how would it even be possible? These were two very public figures in the country at the time. They never spent alone time together. They were always surrounded by people or by security. So yeah, lie debunk. Lie number three: Nehru and Patel were bitter enemies. There is a popular narrative on social media that Nehru and Patel were in a constant power struggle, that Patel hated Nehru and they couldn't work together. But that's just not the reality. Yes, they did have serious ideological differences, but what must also be considered is that they worked together in the cabinet of the Indian government. Patel served as the deputy prime minister under Jawaharlal Nehru as the prime minister. Patel publicly supported Nehru multiple times and vice versa. There are key historical facts that cannot be ignored. For example, the fact that Patel wrote to Nehru emphasizing unity after Mahatma Gandhi's death. So yes, there were disagreements between the two, but to suggest that they were somehow enemies is an exaggerated falsehood. We must remember that politics has friction, and there was friction between Nehru and Patel. They were working together for a long time, but for the most part, they were working together to take the country forward. Lie number four: India had zero growth under Nehru. There are viral claims that Nehru kept India poor, nothing was built, there was a total economic failure under Nehru. But again, that's a lie. The India Nehru inherited in 1947 had a devastated economy, had a 12% literacy rate, there was almost no heavy industry, and the life expectancy was almost 30 years. There have been major developments under Nehru. IITs were established, AIMS was established, Bhakra Nangal Dam was established, Bhilai, Rourkela, Durgapur, so many steel plants. There was the Planning Commission, there was the Bhabha Atomic Research Center. There were many institutions built during his time. The growth reality? Well, the GDP growth at the time was a modest 3 to 4%. But that was a massive tenfold improvement over what we had seen under the British government. In fact, we had seen negative growth in the years leading up to the independence. The reality is that many of the things that happened post Nehru had their foundations laid during Nehru's time. For example, the Green Revolution's field had already started to develop during Nehru's time. So to claim that there was zero growth under Nehru is once again not true. Line number 5. Nehru was anti-Hindu. There are a lot of claims by the Indian right wing that Nehru always appeased the Muslims, that he was anti-Hindu, that he said statements against Hinduism. But the reality is that Nehru was a staunch secular in ideology. He did oppose Hindu majoritarianism, but he was also a staunch critic of Muslim communal politics. The key context that we must consider in this case is that post-partition India had massive communal wounds. There was a lot of violence seen at that time. The leadership's priority at the time was to stop this religious fragmentation, to unite the country, to reassure minorities without angering the majority. It was important to build a country that was not bound by religion. Lie number 6. Nehru blundered by taking Kashmir issue to the United Nations. Okay, so this one is not as much of a lie as it is a complex situation presented too simply. Did Nehru internationalize the Kashmir issue? Yes, that did happen. But the online claims suggest that Nehru internationalized the Kashmir issue unnecessarily, that India was winning and he just stopped the army and went to the UN for no reason. But is this true? Not really. The reality at that time was that Maharaja Hari Singh had signed the Instrument of Accession to India. Indian military, while strong, was not that strong. The Indian military at the time was going through strong reorganization. It had been split between India and Pakistan, and it had British officials on both sides. The reality is that the Indian army did not have the strong lead over the Pakistani military that it has now. Indian army was almost as strong as the Pakistani army at that time. Both countries were struggling economically. Both countries needed money to make ends meet, and a war of attrition at the time would have devastated the economy. The reality is that taking the Kashmir issue to the United Nations was one of the most plausible decisions that anyone could take at the time. It allowed India to label Pakistan as the aggressor, and it also stopped any further war escalation at the time. So this is not as much of a lie as it is my own opinion. You can't draw a line in the sand and say this was the good decision to make or the bad decision to make. But one thing you can say for sure is that this situation is not as simple and as linear as Nehru's critics like to claim. Line number 7. Nehru hated Bose and called him a war criminal. There are claims saying that Nehru and Subhash Chandra Bose were bitter enemies, that Nehru supposedly wrote to the British calling Bose a war criminal. And there are conspiracy theories saying that Nehru wanted Bose to be punished or to be kept away from India to protect his own power. Well, that's not true. Those conspiracy theories are just that, conspiracy theories. The reality is that both of them respected each other. They knew that their approaches were different, but their goal was common. That is the independence of India. Yes, there are some truths of friction. For example, Subhash Chandra Bose defeated the Mahatma Gandhi-backed candidate in the 1939 Congress presidential election. This did create political tension between different members of the Congress party at the time. But that's about it. The personal hatred between the two is not supported by any serious historical evidence. And the same is true for the war criminal letter. This is a doctored letter that was never written by Jawaharlal Nehru. Like, I just want to ask, if Nehru did hate Subhash Chandra Bose, why did he defend the Indian National Army in court? Why did he don his coat again? That just doesn't make sense. Lie number 8. Nehru lived lavishly on public money. What the claims say is that Nehru wasted taxpayer money on expensive cigarettes, luxury lifestyle, and elite comfort while India was still poor. But the reality here is that yes, Nehru did come from a wealthy background. His family, especially his father Motilal Nehru, was affluent at the time. He was personally accustomed to an upper class lifestyle early in his life. But what must be remembered is that the Nehru family spent heavily on the Indian national movement. Motilal Nehru gave up his luxurious lifestyle and donated large sums of money to the Indian Congress Party at the time. The Nehru family, in fact, transformed the Anand Bhavan, that is the big ass house they had, into a political hub. The Nehru family's wealth declined significantly over time because of the contributions they made to the Indian nationalist movement. What must be remembered about Nehru's personal finances as Prime Minister is that Nehru lived in a government official residence like any Prime Minister would. His salary as a Prime Minister was modest by elite standards, and there is no credible evidence that he siphoned public money for personal luxury. In fact, there is no archival proof of Nehru spending extravagantly on anything in his personal life as the Prime Minister of the country. Lie number 9. Nehru hated Bhagat Singh and did nothing to save him. According to the Indian right wing, Nehru disliked Bhagat Singh and the entire Congress leadership wanted to eliminate him. Nehru made no effort to stop this execution, and in fact, Nehru just let Bhagat Singh hang. But what is factually true is that Nehru visited Bhagat Singh in jail back in 1929. Nehru personally met Bhagat Singh in Lahore Central Jail. He publicly expressed sympathy for the revolutionaries' courage, and he wrote about the meetings in his later writing. The Congress leadership, as well as Nehru, tried their best to stop this execution, but they simply failed. Lie number 10. Nehru opposed Vande Mataram. So this is a recent parliament claim by the Prime Minister of the country, Narendra Modi, where he criticized Jawaharlal Nehru's position on Vande Mataram. He claimed that Nehru was against Vande Mataram, that Nehru tried to suppress it, and that Nehru was anti-national in cultural matters. But what is actually true about Nehru's position is that Nehru did not ban Vande Mataram. Yes, Nehru did emphasize the first few paragraphs of Vande Mataram because it helped to unite the country beyond religious lines. Jawaharlal Nehru did not want the Indian national movement to become communal. Jawaharlal Nehru acknowledged the importance of Vande Mataram in the freedom struggle, and the entire Congress leadership, including Nehru, gave Vande Mataram the national song status, just as they adopted Jan Gan Man as the national anthem. The things that we must remember about Nehru is that the man spent 9 years in British prisons trying to make India free, and he spent most of his adult life in public service, not wealth accumulation. Jawaharlal Nehru contributed to the Indian national movement in a significant way, and once India was free, he worked as a nation builder, being the first Prime Minister of the country, setting up institutions that would help India in long term. Thank you, that was about it. If you want to watch more content like this, please subscribe to my channel.